held their cultural festival in Archer's Post the other day. Nobody asked them to what actually needs to go into this cultural bill. The Kalenjin people held their functions in Mount Elgon the other day. Nobody actually approached them to ask them what needs to go into their cultural bill. The coastal area is very rich with culture. Everybody, everywhere, culture is roaring and it's being practiced. But we need to do more. We need to ask communities, what do you want to go into this bill of culture? Otherwise, a lot of work needs to be done. But again, in honor of the Chief Whip who says we support this bill, let us support it as a work in progress. I support.
Thank you. The Honorable Omboko Milemba, member for Emuhaya.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, and let me thank the Whip for moving this bill so well and clearly so, and thank the committee for what they did on trying to bring a bill that will guide culture. And some milestones have been made, whereas we still have room for improvement, like on the role of the county government and the national government. I think the role of the national government should be given more emphasis because culture was supposed to unite us in Kenya. And if we leave it to be managed in enclaves and pockets, like the earlier speaker almost alluded to, then we kill the spirit of using culture as a means to integrate the country. Another milestone was the issue of royalties, which I really loved, because many foreigners and people use cultural artifacts and other expressions without payment. The Maasais, I think, have suffered most because their regalia and other artifactual materials are being used. There is also the issue of database, great milestone highlighted by the bill, because this will assist us to keep track of what is going on within the different cultures and even count them, know the progress. Honorable Speaker, there's the issue of the artifacts transfer and what it contains and so on and so forth. Creation of cultural centers in every county, great. Registration of cultural property, very, very great. And then finally, what I almost questioned was the punishments that have been proposed by the law when you do take away some of these cultural artifacts and other properties. And this I thought was too little, because if you say you'll punish by imprisoning somebody for 2 years or even less, or a fine of 100, 200,000, and you know, this is a person who has affected the entire community and their cultural landscape and expressions, then it looks like we are casualizing what we really intended to achieve in terms of protecting culture and so on and so forth. Given that, Honorable Speaker, the cultural expressions and artifacts are very, very expensive mementos that can fetch very high prices elsewhere when removed from where they are. I talk about this as I look at where I come from, the strong culture of the Abasiekwe community, who are the only rainmakers in this country, and whom in 1963, when it was over-raining in Nairobi and we wanted to get independence, they were invited to come and stop the rains. And now if somebody interferes with them and then is only being fined 200,000 or an imprisonment of 2 years, that is too little. That's the Abasiekwe community, which still continues to make rains. And they have a number of issues about what we need to do, and this law should have provided that base to protect their culture so that it's not exuded by other people. It also reminds me of the Tiriki in Vihiga, who have a very strong cultural base. They have their forests and expressions, landscapes, which they use for circumcision. I think they'll be circumcising this year. And they really need to be protected. So when we casualize the punishments, then this is something we shall discuss and make amendments. But more importantly, Honorable Speaker, is what the earlier speaker spoke to, because the bill seems to leave out certain areas of culture which I'll call cultural patrimony. In cultural patrimony, you now go beyond the artifacts themselves and deal with cultural expressions and the nature of the culture itself. The law does not seem to go to that extent. It is identifying items and dealing with items of culture. But you know, culture includes even archaeological sites. So how are we going to deal with archaeological sites that are actually the mother of culture and the other cultural expressions that are supposed to be protected? There has been an attempt, Honorable Speaker, to protect culture using the international law. And this bill tries to actually actualize some of those conventions that try to protect culture internationally, which is very good. And one of such conventions has been the Hague Convention in its Article 1, which has tried to protect the cultural property and landscapes even during war. But then our bill must encompass the broadness of culture beyond the artifacts and the physical things that can be seen or carried from one place to another. Of course, not forgetting that what this parliament has always done, and which is wrong, and seems to happen again, is we get tired when we are making the law and indicate that the cabinet secretary shall make certain items or certain comments or certain laws which otherwise is not his business to do. And this bill has also gone that direction. And therefore, for the third reading, we need to go into the details and make sure that we make a complete law, even if it's not be full, because culture is very broad, but it's a law that will be a beginning to protect our cultural practices moving forward. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
I have the mic. Thank you very much. The Honorable Adan Kainan, member for ALDAS.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This culture bill introduced by the Leader of Majority seeks to promote, preserve, and institutionalize Kenya's rich and diverse cultural heritage, Madam Speaker. At the core of the bill proposes the establishment of National Cultural Heritage Council, a specialized body tasked with the management, promotion, and protection of Kenya's cultural heritage sites, indigenous practices, and artistic expression. The council's work is to preserve, is to create a culture of continuity and harnessing the promotion of our rich cultural heritage. Madam Speaker, this bill also attempts to create some sort of cultural preservation and revitalization. Kenya, Madam Speaker, is home to over 40 ethnic communities with distinct traditions, languages, artistic expression, and therefore this bill is timely because it attempts to safeguard the endangered languages like the Ogiek, the super language of my good friend, the Honorable Mili, and also attempts to protect sacred sites like the Kaya forest of the Mijikenda and preserve traditional craftsmanship such as the Maasai beadwork and the Lamu Swahili architecture. Madam Speaker, if you look at the face of Kenya, and you look at Mili and Mili Odhiambo and her language, the super language, and I'm sure they have been consumed by the rich Luo culture, they are still struggling, and therefore we need to create a special place for them so that even after the next generations, the super community is still remembered. Madam Speaker, this bill also will boost tourism and economic growth. Cultural heritage is a key driver of heritage tourism, Madam Speaker, which contributes significantly to Kenya's economy. Therefore, by promoting cultural festivals such as the Lake Turkana Cultural Festival, the Lamu Swahili Cultural Festival, and other, e.g. like the Lake Turkana Cultural Festival, Lamu Cultural Festival, and historical landmarks such as Fort Jesus, the Great Rift Valley prehistorical sites. The bill positions Kenya as a premier cultural tourism destination, Madam Speaker. And therefore, this in turn is expected to create job opportunities, support local artisans, and attract international investment. Madam Speaker, this bill, once passed, will also contribute to the strengthening of our national identity and unity. Madam Speaker, Kenya is a diverse nation. I always say that Kenya is a collection of many nation states. The rich historical, cultural heritage of these communities must be documented, contextualized, put into a form that can easily be used by the current generation and the future generation, Madam Speaker. And therefore, this cultural heritage, Madam Speaker, plays a fundamental role in our national identity and cohesion. And this is what this country requires. Madam Speaker, when the colonialists brought us together with our diverse cultural heritage, we attempted to get a Kenyan culture. A Kenyan culture in the form of one language, one heritage, one identity, and we're still struggling. And therefore today, if you ask me, that is one thing that we should prioritize as leadership so that we have the Kenyan culture, the Kenyan identity, the Kenyan dress, the Kenyan way of thinking, the Kenyan way of doing things, so that that becomes the unique Kenyan identification. And therefore, I hope this bill, once passed, Madam Speaker, will accelerate our shared history and indigenous knowledge system, Madam Speaker. And therefore, again, once that is done, once that is done, we'll see, as the bill aims to instill patriotism, encourage cultural pride, and bridge ethnic divides, ultimately reinforcing the sense of being a Kenyan, Madam Speaker. And this is one thing that has been lacking. Madam Speaker, over the years, we have prided ourselves. And this is one thing that really affects our national unity. Kenyans are known for their resilience. Kenyans are known for their focus. Kenyans are known for their rich cultural heritage. But Madam Speaker, what we have lacked is a law that will help us coalesce around that identity and project and promote and protect that Kenyan identity that will demonstrate the uniqueness of the Kenyan culture, not only locally, but also internationally, thus earning Kenya being a unique tourist destination, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, countries like Turkey, I wish you had that. Countries like Turkey, countries like United Arab Emirates, countries like Japan benefit from tourism. And yet they lack so many other natural resources, Madam Speaker. Can we be in the league of the same nation, Madam Speaker, once we identify and maximize on this critical national heritage, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, over the years also, there has been an attempt, because of this lack of identity, to profile, to stigmatize, and to divide the Kenyan society along regional lines, along regionalism, along tribal lines, Madam Speaker, along negative ethnicity, Madam Speaker. And this has discouraged, Madam Speaker, our identity as one united, sovereign state called Kenya, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, immediately after independence, we attempted to promote English at the expense of Kiswahili, Madam Speaker, which is a local, our own indigenous language, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it's the high time that we also identify English is very good. It's the language of the white-collar job seekers. But equally, Madam Speaker, we also need to promote Kiswahili so that the Kenyan communities, Kiswahili is a collection of many languages, the Arabic language, the Turkish language, the Portuguese language, the Bantu language, and many other languages, Madam Speaker. And therefore, at times when we interact with our colleagues from the East African community, in particular the Tanzanians, we are lost. Which is the most refined Kiswahili? Is it the Kenyan Kiswahili, or the Tanzanian Kiswahili, or the East African Kiswahili, or the Central African Kiswahili, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, it's because of this that once this bill is passed, we hope and pray that some of these things will be collected, put together, and give us a clear identity. Madam Speaker, on the face of it, there are clear gaps in this particular bill, which must also be addressed. Madam Speaker, we currently have the National Museum of Kenya, we have the Kenya National Archive, and we have the Kenya Film Corporation. Madam Speaker, the role of these organizations must also be clearly acknowledged in order to avoid any perceived jurisdictional conflict, Madam Speaker. Because it is very easy to legislate this, and yet tomorrow, National Museum will come and say, this bill encroaches on their mandate. The National Archive will come and say, this bill encroaches on their mandate. The Kenya Film Commission will also say, this bill encroaches on their mandate. Madam Speaker, in the third reading, we must look at this, and I'm sure with the proper legal minds, this can also be addressed, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this also requires, once this bill is passed, there is need to build capacity. Because we have many professionals, academic professionals. We need to have specialized people to deal with our culture, to deal with this particular, the implementation of this particular bill, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we have passed many laws. Many laws. Madam Speaker, at times enforcement becomes a problem. We pass laws, and this country is known. Madam Speaker, in 1999, I had the privilege, and allow me to say this, I had the privilege of being a member of the Finance Bill, and Finance Committee, the Finance Committee, and we went to Malaysia.
I'll give 2 minutes. I'll give you two. I'll give you 2 for your 5 terms in this house. So 2 minutes.
Passing bills is one thing.
The next mic.
When we went to Malaysia in the name of benchmarking, Madam Speaker, we were told, we were with the late Honorable Michuki and many others, we were told, we went around, we were welcomed by the Deputy Speaker, by the clerk, and finally we asked for a document that we will use to improve the facilities in Nairobi and many other urban centers. Shockingly, the clerk went to their archive, their library, and gave us a document that they borrowed from Kenya in 1974. And we were told to use the same document for benchmarking. I will not be surprised that this bill and many other bills similar bills are in our archives. So what I'm trying to say, it's very easy to pass this bill. Are we ready to implement? Are we ready to domesticate this? Are we ready to enforce this? And this is one thing that we have been lacking. Very good in theories, very good in legislations, but when it comes to implementation, we are not very good. And therefore, this is a good bill, and I hope and pray that once we go through the third reading, we'll have a bill that meets the test of time. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Before you, Honorable Johanna Ngeno, I want to give an opportunity to the minority whip. So the Honorable Millie Odhiambo, please. Then we'll have Honorable Johanna Ngeno.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for indulging me, Madam Speaker, because as I'd requested, you know, we are having a current meeting with the different departments on the budget policy statements. I have to run back. Madam Speaker, I wish to say that I support this bill. And Madam Speaker, there is definitely need for cultural preservation. And Madam Speaker, because culture is what shows our identity as a people. And people who don't have their culture or don't preserve their culture are a lost people because they don't know who they are. Madam Speaker, because I don't want to adversely mention a friendly country, of late I've been to many countries. And I can tell you there's one country that has built completely, they brought a city anew. And if you actually look at that city, there's something that is lacking. It lacks a spirit because it lacks the culture. That they have done so much in the last 5 or so years to modernize it, but because the modernized aspect doesn't show you where they're coming from, the city feels empty. It doesn't have a spirit because it doesn't show what the people were like. And so, Madam Speaker, if you look at, for instance, somewhere like Marrakesh in Morocco, it shows where they're coming from. It's so beautiful, it shows the culture. But culture is not just manifest in the physical, but I like this bill because it just shows also that it is also in very different aspects, including language. And as a person who is a cultural minority, I know what that means. Madam Speaker, I am born a Suba. My father is a Suba. And I have seen in my generation how that has actually transformed over the years. Where up to my grandfather has a Luo name and a Suba name. All the people ahead of him have very Suba Bantu names. All of us are from my grandfather down, now only have Luo names. And we have lost the Suba names. Madam Speaker, fortunately, the language has been restored. So the Suba now speak Suba, but not all Suba speak Lusuba. But for a fact, we have almost lost all the culture in relation to Suba, except a few. And I want to thank the organizations that have been doing cultural events that seek to sustain what is a little that is remaining of the Suba people as a people. And Madam Speaker, I am actually a very proud Suba, even though I can tell you I'm both Suba and Luo because my mother is Luo. And I love that we preserve both the Luo culture and the Suba culture. Madam Speaker, one of the issues that I'd want to also indicate, which I've seen this bill commenting on, but we need to strengthen, is the issue of intellectual property rights on our culture. That there are so many people that have been appropriating our cultural issues. Give example of even our cultural dressing, Madam Speaker. And they go and sell it at a song. Yet it is actually who we are. And in the US now, it's a very big issue called cultural appropriation. That when you see people doing or saying things that is not there, people are saying, I don't want to culturally appropriate. And in the same manner, we need to use those same terminology that we actually criminalize cultural appropriation, or find a way, even if we don't criminalize it, to make sure that we preserve our culture and the things that are very important to us that other people may wish to appropriate. There must be a way in which they pay back to our societies for using that. Madam Speaker, I can tell you for a fact when I go outside, I wear this band on my head. And in Kenya, people just say, oh, Millie, we actually see you like it's an insignia, it's what shows who you are. But in a lot of communities in Kenya, we actually have this. It's just at a modernized mind. In the Luo culture, if you see me doing the beaded one, it is called ligisa. And ligisa is worn by women in leadership. So if you see me wearing that, it basically says, in my culture, it shows that I'm a woman leader. But for now, because we don't actually take it seriously, when people see me, think it's just an issue, a statement of fashion. Yes, it's fashionable, but it's also cultural. And it is not just amongst the Luo community, it's amongst very many communities, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we must also see how we link culture with the tourism. I want to thank the Parliament that they recently organized a very good training, and the training was on PPP, public-private partnerships. And Madam Speaker, one of the things that I actually picked up from that is the immense potential of linking tourism and culture. And Madam Speaker, I recently, together with my husband, we've recently visited a place called El Nido in the Philippines. And Madam Speaker, we pay quite a bit of money to do things which you could do here in Kenya very easily. Things like cultural immersion and doing things that have to do with our culture. Visiting a spiritual center like Atego Island in my constituency, visiting the 2 bird islands in my constituency, or the cultural caves in Fagano Island, amongst others. We have a lot that we get from our culture that we can use to, encourage tourism. Madam Speaker, however, I just want to say that I have a rider in relation to this bill that we must strengthen, which is the issue of harmful cultural practices. The Constitution outlaws harmful cultural practices, and I would want us to strengthen the sections of this bill that deals with harmful cultural practices, and say that even though we actually allow cultural practices, there are certain cultural practices that are harmful, such as female genital mutilation, beading, forced wife inheritance, early and forced marriage of young girls. And Madam Speaker, you find there are people, when you go to communities, they want to justify for you. Before I came here, I used to represent a lot of young girls and women in court. And I remember one time when we were in Kajiado court, and the Children Act had just already passed. And we arrested some old man who had married a 10-year-old girl. And when we went there, he said, no, but this is allowed in my culture. And then when we told him, no, we cannot allow you, it's no longer allowed in law, then he said, did Honorable Saitoti know that you passed such a law? Because he thought then Honorable Saitoti should have stopped us from passing a law stopping him from marrying a 10-year-old girl. So because of that, Madam Speaker, we must put a rider that even though we have culture, there are certain cultural practices that are retrogressive. But also, Madam Speaker, one of the things that I want us to do is to enhance the historical bit where we have now distorted culture. And Madam Speaker, if you actually look at our historical issues, you discover, for instance, amongst the Luo community, women were really respected and exalted. But now people are actually doing the reverse. If you look at the bigger clans in Luo, they start with their female name. It's almost like the House of Mumbi. We start with the Kanyamwa, Kanyadoto, Kanyekela, Kanya something. They are all about women. But now we are being told women cannot lead. Who told you women cannot lead? We are in charge of clans. So if you are in charge of clans, why can we then not lead? We must put our history correctly, and our history respected and exalted women. And I want to say that I'm very happy the House of Mumbi has actually kept that. And so we know that's why you see a lot of women in Kikuyu land get elected, because they preserved that history. But in some of our areas, we are losing that. And so we have people creating their own stories about what was there in culture. Madam Speaker, I support, and I look at it more keenly so that I see if there are areas, the areas that I've spoken, if they are not well covered, that will bring amendment. I support. Thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable Johanna Ngeno.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also wish to make a small contribution of this matter before this House, especially something that touches on our cultures. You know, Madam Speaker, when we speak about culture, it means so many things to most of us, especially those of us who were brought up in a very serious cultural background. Madam Speaker, when I grew up, a friend of mine who was a teacher used to tell me that an uncultured person is an uncivilized person. To the extent that in most of the cases, people used to believe that when you follow your culture, it's like you are primitive. It's like you're doing backward things. But Madam Speaker, as time went by, we realized that even what the colonial governments and the white people brought us here in Africa was their culture. So that when you even compare the biblical writings, you compare with what our people used to believe in, there is no difference. It's only that ours was not in written form. Only that, but we used to pray to the same God. We believe in the same God. It's only the names are different. But what we were calling our God is the same God that the Bible teaches us. The cultures that we had, the way we prayed and how we behaved, the way we circumcised our boys, and all that, Madam Speaker, is an indication that our culture was just thrown out because somebody else wanted us to adopt their culture so that we forget about ours. Madam Speaker, culture defines who we are. It's our background, and it is something that we must live with, Madam Speaker, so that we must find ways of promoting our culture so that it can be inherited from generations to generations. Culture, Madam Speaker, is the heartbeat of humanity. It is actually how most of us were brought up, and if you were to ask everybody, they were brought up in a certain culture. Even if it is those who were brought up in Nairobi, still they will go back to their cultures. They will be taught on how their people used to behave, the kind of clothing people used to have, etc., etc. So therefore, Madam Speaker, I wish to support this particular bill that touches on how to protect the cultural artifacts, the identity of our nation and our people. And of course, Madam Speaker, to look into what exactly do we need to do so that our culture is not lost. Madam Speaker, first we talk about the artifacts. Artifacts, Madam Speaker, are tools which were used by our people. And each and every people, each and every community has their own ways or their own means or their own artifacts. Madam Speaker, and this one ranges from clothing to the kind of artifacts they used to use, whether when they were going to pray or their praying sites, or what they use also to appease the enemies, or what they used to, when they want to appease their gods, when they want to give blessings, when they want to do their traditional circumcisions, even when the elders were having their drinks and like the current kind of drinking. Madam Speaker, those are cultural artifacts that we must protect by all means. Madam Speaker, I remember at the beginning of Kibaki government, I think it was around 2003-04, the people from the Kalenjin community who had lost a very great warrior and an overseer and a Laibon called Koitalel Samoe, disputed and petitioned the government to ensure that they return the artifacts which had been looted by the colonial government at that time and took them away to their country. And at that time, Madam Speaker, the president of that time helped that community to bring back their artifacts, only that they did not surrender the skull or the head of the Laibon. Madam Speaker, those artifacts have a very serious meaning to the communities where that Laibon came from. And that is why it was very important that they bring back those particular artifacts. Madam Speaker, even in many other areas, many other communities, even the sub-tribes where we come from, there are artifacts which were confiscated, like the stools, the three-legged stools, which were used for prayers and were used also for blessings, and which were confiscated by the Europeans. Madam Speaker, there are those ones that remained. There are those ones that we still have in our homes. And this law, Madam Speaker, protects the misuse and the looting and the stealing of these particular artifacts which can help, or which were used as our traditional memories for traditional use. Madam Speaker, when we talk about culture also touches on the cultural clothing. Every community, Madam Speaker, in this country have their own traditional clothing, their own cultural clothing. And Madam Speaker, I would wish also one day in this house, Madam Speaker, we introduce a cultural day where every member, because at least we all come from particular backgrounds, particular communities, so that we can say this is a cultural day where every member of this house will wear their cultural clothing, so that we dress the way our communities used to dress. And you will be shocked, Madam Speaker, because we have our dresses, cultural dresses that fits us so well, and they are so good, so that when you see our ladies, if they were to put on those particular clothings and dresses, Madam Speaker, you'll be shocked at how beautiful they look. And even men, when they put on those particular dresses, clothes, Madam Speaker, you will imagine how also men handsomely look, apart from the ones we wear in Parliament. Like when we put on, Madam Speaker.
I know the Honorable Irene Mayaka is next in my list, but I think you are saying you have a point of order, Honorable Irene Mayaka? Yes. Please proceed. What is out of order?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the Honorable Member is out of order because he's telling us that we only look beautiful when we wear cultural clothes. What does he mean? What is he insinuating? Is he trying to say that right now we don't look beautiful? He needs to withdraw.
Madam Speaker,
I thought we could address the first point of order. Honorable
yes,
Member for Emukuru, what do you have to say about that?
And I will address Mheshimiwa Milli's also point of order. I know what she is.
No. You cannot address a point of order when you have not heard it.
I will, Madam Speaker, I just want to say that, you know, when you look, I said our women, our ladies will look even more beautiful when they dress in their traditional dress. Just like our men will look more handsome when they dress in our cultural dresses. So, Madam Speaker, what I meant is, we are beautiful.
Chairman, order.
Our ladies are beautiful.
Order. We have another point of order by the Honorable Millie Odhiambo. Please take your seat. What is out of order, Honorable Millie Odhiambo?
Madam Speaker, thank you for giving me the opportunity. Madam Speaker, I'm just worried that the member seems to suggest that we should be coming to Parliament dressed, naked with just a small thing underneath. Because culturally, that's how we dressed. We were naked with something underneath. Madam Speaker, is that really in order? Is that what we are implying? Our culture, we were half naked, Madam Speaker. The world is evolving, and that is part of culture. So are you suggesting that members should be coming to the House naked?
Madam Speaker, we should be proud of our culture. And it doesn't matter how that culture looked like. Whether we used to put on, and after all, Madam Speaker, when you look at the kind of dressing that we have today, our ladies are almost naked. And yet, that is not even our cultural dress. So what I meant, Madam Speaker, is that we would, let us be proud of where we are, where we came from, who we are. And that starts from our artifacts, to our dress, to our food, to the food that we eat, to the sites that we normally visit. Because, Madam Speaker, even the cultural sites that we visit will look more, even healing, than the sites that we visit, like even the National Assembly. Madam Speaker, we normally had places that we will go for cultural prayers, and they look so soothing than even any other place. So what I meant, Madam Speaker, is that our ladies are beautiful, but they will be more beautiful if they were to put on.
Well, you've done very well to defend yourself. The Honorable Irene Mayaka. And thank you for your patience, Irene.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I also want to support this particular bill, which I think is very well placed before the House. And Honorable Speaker, this is a bill that actually gives meat to bone to Article 11 of the Constitution, because that already speaks about protecting, promoting, and defending our culture, but it doesn't give us the structure and the how to do that in a manner that actually ensures that all the cultures within our country are actually protected. Madam Speaker, the fact that as a nation we have a variety of cultures is actually a very good thing, because we are able to showcase the different aspects of who the people of Kenya are. And Honorable Speaker, just as a few members have already said, is that most of us who are city-born children, who have not had the opportunity to interact with our culture, we don't really understand, unless you had parents like mine who ensured that you knew about the traditional dances of Abagusi, the traditional liquor of Abagusi, and various other traditions. You will not be able to really interact with that. Honorable Speaker, and also, this is actually a very good coincidence, because I know you skipped statements, but my statements was actually alluding to an aspect of protecting some of the cultural sites that the people of Abagusi and especially Nyamira County has. For example, Honorable Speaker, we have a place in Manga Hills that is called the Engoro ya Manga, where it has been said that when you drop something in that particular hole, it goes all the way to Lake Victoria. And that is one of the sites that has been beholden by our people. We have cultural stones there that actually look like a person. We have cultural huts there that people actually go there and pray. And actually, Honorable Speaker, when people go to visit Manga Hills and those specific places, like the men dress in suits out of respect for those sites. And what they do there is that they go, they pray for the community, they pray for their families. And these are some of the things that I'm actually seeking to protect and to ensure that it is preserved so that even our children get to learn about it. Honorable Speaker, the other thing that I really like is that the bill even speaks about our language. Because most of the people, most of our children now, because they are born from families of different communities, they're not able to speak our languages. And also because of school again. Unless you deliberately, as a parent, go out of your way to teach your children their languages, their ethnic languages, they do not even speak it. And those are some of the things that we need to reserve. Honorable Speaker, I just want to speak about some of the clauses that for me really stood out. Like, for example, clause 9 that speaks of establishing royalties. That is very important because we do not want these cultures to fade away. We do not want, for example, the Maasai shuka to fade away because it has not been protected by royalties. We do not want the sisal skirt that the Luos use to dance their traditional dances to fade away because it is not protected. Or even, Honorable Speaker, our traditional alcohol, ebusa. I know different communities call this by different names, but we do not want that to also disappear as well. Clause 10 speaks about compensation of people's culture. And on this particular one, I'm very interested and very keen on it. Because, for example, if you go to a wedding and people dance our obokano from the Gusi community, I'd like to see a situation where royalties are actually paid back to the community. Or the ribina dance, that for us, we use that dance when we are inviting rains to come to our community. Honorable Speaker, the other clause is clause 11. That speaks about exports and imports of products. Again, very interesting, and I'm very biased in terms of giving examples from my community, the Abagusi community, because we are famously known for the soapstone culture and different items that are made out of the soapstone. But this is something that has slowly disappeared. We are seeing a situation where it is now individuals who are doing the exports on their own, instead of actually having it being like a community thing that is being done. So that people out there know that when you get a salt shaker or a tot glass or a mug for drinking tea that is made out of soapstone, you know that this has come from the Gusi community. And if you can have a way of even ensuring that this is even engraved and the royalties are protected, then that will be a fantastic thing. The other clause, Honorable Speaker, is clause 18 that speaks of promotion of culture. And Honorable Speaker, this particular one, I just want to connect it with the Utamaduni Day. Because yes, we have Utamaduni Day, we have the national celebration, but for me, this is a celebration that should actually be devolved down to different communities. So that on this day nationally, we know that as the people of Kenya, we are all celebrating our specific culture. I also like the fact that we want to have cultural centers that mushroom out of having this particular bill in place, so that if you come to Nyamira County or you go to Baringo or you go to Kirinyaga or you go to Samburu, there's a place where you can actually go and see that this is where people have managed to it's like a museum where you can be able to see different artifacts. In Nyamira, for example, Honorable Speaker, we have a restaurant that the owner of that restaurant has actually set aside one area where you can go into our traditional huts, you can see how the busa was being made, you can have an opportunity to eat our traditional vegetables, chinsaga, managu, you can be able to eat our traditional ugali, you can be able to see the setup of the Gusi families and how where the eldest son would stay in the homestead, and the younger sons and the wife and all that. But having said that, Honorable Speaker, about all the beauties of our culture that we can actually defend, for me, the one thing that I also want to us to be very careful is the promotion of the retrogressive culture. And this we need to check the bill and confirm, which we will do, so that if there's any particular place that does not categorically speak about the retrogressive culture, then we can set that aside. Retrogressive in the sense of, for example, for us, the FGM practice. That is definitely not a culture that we would want to promote. So we have to be very careful to ensure that these cultures that are very retrogressive are not encouraged. Honorable Speaker, having said that, and so that I also save time for the other members, is that, yes, I really want us to celebrate this bill, but also I do not want this to be one of those bills that is just put on the shelf somewhere after its assent. My wish is that, and I know the majority party represented by Honorable Naomi Zia, and they can listen, is that the day that the President assents to this bill, that there's an actual celebration awareness at State House of all the cultures in this country alongside that signing of that bill, so that everybody in this country is aware that we do have a bill in place that is going to protect our culture. We don't want a situation where when you talk about the bill outside there and everyone asks you, when was that assented to? We don't have anything like that. So the awareness, the communication out there has to be extremely powerful so that everyone is really aware of that. And finally, Honorable Speaker, and I like that some of the concerns that we voiced here about Kenya not having a national outfit when we go for national functions or when our athletes represent us out there, at least at the Paris Olympics, we had some sort of a national culture that portrayed the Maasai culture that was worn out there. And it was very exciting that majority of the other participants from other countries actually recognized that Kenya has a beautiful outfit. I wish we could even adopt that as our national dress for our party. So, I mean, sorry, not for our party, for our country, so that anytime we have representation out there of people going to represent the country, they can wear our national outfit. Having said that, Honorable Speaker, I do support the bill and I submit. I thank you.
Thank you very much. The Honorable Ferdinand Wanyonyi, member for Kwanza.
At long last. Madam Speaker, I want to take this opportunity, first of all, to thank all the members that you have contributed on this bill. And I think we have actually exhausted the bill. And as the previous speaker just mentioned, the third reading on this bill, let's take action. When the President assents to this bill, Madam Speaker, I want us to move forward because there are so many things that have gone wrong. I'm a little older than some of the members here, and I can tell you things have gone out. The next 50 years or even 20 years to come, Kenya will not be Kenya that you and I would have admired to be, because, Madam Speaker, things are going haywire. I come from a culture in Luhyaland, and we had a very good culture. For example, the circumcision of the Luhya. You know, we had a special way of going for that particular circumcision. Today, you know, it's a laughing stock, you know. And somebody mentioned, and I think I want to quite agree with whoever mentioned, for us, those days, and I saw those from my own older brothers and other neighbors, what have you, for you to go for circumcision, you went naked. From the river, you go to the river, and from there you are taken almost 2-3 kilometers to your home, and you are operated there openly. Today, Madam Speaker, nothing like that is happening. Things have gone off. Then, of course, those days, and in fact, even as recent as maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago, when a child gets married, you know, a boy cannot go and greet the mother-in-law. It's out of respect, not anything else. Today, he can go and hug the mother-in-law, which is actually wrong. In our culture, it's not supposed to be like that. Madam Speaker, we have a problem. This country must be protected. I have a specific case, for example. We had Bomas of Kenya. If those of you have not gone there, in fact, you go there now, is no longer the Bomas of Kenya we used to know, because it was an area for cultural preservation. Bomas of Kenya is no more. You go to Bomas of Kenya, you will have the Maasai's culture, the Kikuyu's culture, Luyas, what have Luos, and you see that culture was very, very impressive. You're there, you pay the money, and you are there for some time, and of course you come back and say, okay, is this how this community behave? That again is gone. Go to Bomas of Kenya, it's not the same thing. It's now just a business area, doing other things. So we should actually, because I was asking my colleague here, we have a ministry for culture and sports. That ministry must be revived. That ministry must be given guidelines to be able to preserve some of those cultures that actually are very, very important for us to be able to maintain. Because I know for sure that the colonialists came, and when they came, people now want to behave like a Mzungu. But look, that again is now something under the bridge. We just have to behave our own way. We have to revive. For example, in Luya culture, if a child goes to get married, he has to pay almost 13 cows. Today, there's nothing like that. There's nothing like that. And it's a culture that actually a Luya boy marrying another person from another area, you pay the money before anything else, even before the wedding. Today, it's no longer there. It's just to understand each other. Like my brother who was okay, I don't want to mention that. But that again, Madam Speaker, we should do something about it. This bill, when it comes to third reading, as members of this Parliament, to be able to have very good intervention, the closer you can be able to correct some of the areas that you feel you should be able to correct, because it's just for the interest of this country. Not because of our personal interest, but the interest of this country, that we actually maintain our culture, and so that we are distinct from other people. Because you go out here in the world, you see people behave very differently. And so I want to say that, Mr. Speaker, as you take over, as you take over the seat, I want you to also take note of this, and I think let's have a house full in the third reading of this bill, and let's look at areas where we can be able to put some inputs and be able to see if the culture of this country can be improved through a specific ministry. And don't just put that Ministry of Culture and Social Services and Sports or whatever it is, should be able to take up some of the roles that we are talking about and be able to see what it can do. And last year, not least, I think the county government and the central government of this country should work in collaboration to be able to maintain some of those cultural areas. There's some areas which actually, some of them are still there, they are neglected, but it should be revived, so that through the county government, those cultural centers be revived for the benefit of our future, so that we have a good historical background. So what will be our grandchildren write about Kenya? It will be nothing. So we want that cultural centers to be revived, be protected through the Ministry of Culture and Social Services, and it should be also be replicated in the county government. Should have the similar ministry or department in the culture in the county government to be able to maintain these areas, because it's important, Mr. Speaker, that we keep these people as soon as it is. And of course, then we'll have, like this bill is actually saying, of course, anybody now, once we are through with that, anybody destroying any of these cultures, whatever, should be actually be punished in terms of paying fine. And that fine should be going, of course, as you know, if you are going to Bomas of Kenya, you pay a lot of money. And there was a Minister of Culture who was getting that as an income. Similarly, anybody interfering with any of these cultural centers should be, and of course the behavior, whatever it is, should be fined. And those things are being fined through wazee wa mtaa, or the communities can be able to come up with whatever. So that again is something that we have to revive for the benefit of our country. I want to take this opportunity to thank the the leader of the majority to have come up with this particular bill, and I think it's very timely, and I hope and pray that we'll support it to the last thing and be able to have it implemented immediately. His Excellency puts a consent on the same. I want to thank you and I support this bill.
The Honorable John Waweru.
Mr. Speaker, I must thank you. I must thank you profusely for giving me this opportunity. And secondly, I have to say that this is a very laudable effort by the Committee on Sports, Youth and Culture under the leadership of the Honorable Wanyama. Mr. Speaker, we are discussing about culture. And in this context, Mr. Speaker, we are actually going into the heart of a discussion for the fight of the soul of a people. Mr. Speaker, it has been said before that if you want to disenfranchise an individual, what you do is you deny them their mother tongue and you take their father's name. Because if you deny someone their mother tongue, everything that is housed in language, whether you call it belief, whether you call them their truth or their identity, it is housed in the language that they speak. In their father's name, an individual finds their identity. And to that extent, Mr. Speaker, then, the Swahili are very right when they tell us that mwachamila ni mtumwa. Mr. Speaker, this vessel that we are calling culture is the one, as I have said, that carries a people's identity, their history, their belief, and even their truth. From the culture I come from, Mr. Speaker, when you refer to your mother, you call her Maito. Maito, if you extrapolate the name, is two words. There is the word Ma and Ito. Ma means the truth. Ito means ours. So the name mother, in essence, means our truth. And that is why you find that in this patriarchal society, the Kikuyu culture is unable to thrive because by its very formation, the Kikuyu culture was not supposed to be a patriarchal culture. In fact, we all believe that we came from Mombi, the creator. And Mombi is the only name that humanity shares with God. It is the only word in our dictionary, as the Kikuyu speaking people, that a man shares a word, a name with God. Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, sorry, Honorable Speaker, I have to say that the tragedy that we seek to remedy by having a bill that gives a framework for the protection of our culture has to do with us finding our way back. What in Gikoyo they would call Woshokia Roe Mokaro, making sure that the river gets back to its course. Because as we speak today, we have been knocked off our, what you would call our track of organic cultural development and civilization. And how it happened was very systematic, Mr. Speaker. The moment an individual showed up in our country carrying three very dangerous things, they were carrying on one hand a Bible, a gun, and education and what you would call government. And with that, they were able to rub off our cultures to the extent that today, Mr. Speaker, any individual who professes the Christian faith can give you the lineage of one Jesus Christ of Nazareth, all the way back to his lineage to the house of David, all the way back to the house of Abraham and his son Isaac, and all the way back to the creation story, Adam. And they can give you a chronology of who gave birth to who gave birth to who, and these are tens of generations. However, Mr. Speaker, even I myself would struggle to give my lineage beyond 7 generations. I might profess that I am Kiarie. Kiarie wa Waweru. Waweru wa Ng'ethe. Ng'ethe wa Geshi. Geshi wa Kang'ora. And then beyond that, Mr. Speaker, 7 generations down, then I get lost, Mr. Speaker. As such, Mr. Speaker, then, whatever it is that was housed in the language that I speak, it faces a great danger today. I might be the last of our people who will be able to speak the language that my father spoke and my mother spoke. To that extent, then, Mr. Speaker, the discussion this afternoon becomes extremely important when we juxtapose it with where the world is today. When we talk about the world today, two great things are affecting culture. One, globalization. Two, technology. And they're working hand in hand, Mr. Speaker. That today, as we speak, there are large language models that are being developed using data that is scraped off the internet to form what you would call emerging technologies in artificial intelligence. But let us look at them, Mr. Speaker. The language models that we are speaking about today in the world of artificial intelligence and emerging technologies, of the data that they are scraping out of the internet, we are told that 46.5% of that data is in one language, English. German follows closely, Russian follows after, but then, at what point then will my Gikuyu language or my Kamba language from my lineage be onboarded onto this new development in what we are calling the fourth industrial revolution? As such, Mr. Speaker, what has been happening then is a lot of cultural appropriation. We know that in this country, there are artifacts that throughout history have been plucked out of our country and are in exhibition and being monetized in capitals abroad, in museums abroad, Mr. Speaker. The man-eating lions of Tsavo, two of them, male lions that did not have a mane, a spectacle to behold. When they were shot by a man called Peterson, they were then taken to some museums in Western capitals where they are to date. We are told by historians that one Koitalel Arap Samoei was decapitated, and his head and maybe the skull at that point was taken to museums abroad. Those museums do have entry fee. There are researchers who make big researches out of the data that is in those museums. However, is the Tsavo community benefiting from this appropriation of this culture? Are the Kipsigis benefiting from their leader being exhibited in a museum for now close to a century and some more years? So that, Mr. Speaker, then, the need for a comprehensive legislative framework that enables us to support the integration of culture, the cultural properties in this country, and cultural heritage becomes a priority, Mr. Speaker. Now, here is the critique, Mr. Speaker, that even as we are speaking to this bill as is, it is one devoid of specificities, Mr. Speaker. That in the format that it is and the style that it is big on cultural artifacts. However, culture is larger than artifacts. There are many elements of culture that are not covered in this bill as it exists. So much so that the option we have as a House is to either pass it as it is and then seek for places to amend later, or we might decide then, and in the third reading, Mr. Speaker, we might find a place in the clauses that exist or introduce new clauses where we are able to cover a wider definition of culture rather than zero in on just cultural artifacts. But now the bill has presented, Mr. Speaker, because it is big on cultural artifacts, then we can talk about issues to do with intellectual property. Mr. Speaker, whatever is covered here on intellectual property is a bit shallow. And my question was whether that shall be covered in subsequent or subsidiary legislation, maybe in regulation, or whether there shall be another bill that comes to take care of intellectual property. But finally, Mr. Speaker, I have to say that the essence is urgent. One, for the preservation of our culture and the protection of our culture. But secondly, Mr. Speaker, and most importantly, This house is the house that ratifies international treaties, international conventions. And so, Mr. Speaker, the treaties that we have ratified, some by UNESCO and many others to do with culture, have been given life and effect by us processing a bill that takes care of culture. The Constitution, Mr. Speaker, in Article 11, also is given effect by us passing this bill. And it is for that reason, Mr. Speaker, that I stand to support and seek to amend in the third reading. I thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to speak on this bill.
The Honorable Christine Ombaka.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to what is very, very important in our lives. We are talking about a bill that deals with culture. And definition of culture. What is culture? It's a way of life as lived by a people at a particular time in history. It means that culture is our way of life. It's the language we speak, it's the song we sing, it's the food, the dress that we have, the food we eat, the sports, everything about our lives is culture. But it is as lived by a people at a particular time in history. It means that culture evolves. It is dynamic. It changes from time to time. The people of the past had their own culture. It moved on and changed on, and we acquired others, and we dropped other ways of culture, other ways of survival, and we moved on and acquired others. Just like language dies. When a language dies, then that culture is finished. That culture, the people of that language will not exist because the language has died. It is important to realize that culture is our identity. If it dies, we are dead. It is cardinal. It is in our lives. It is part and parcel of us. It is our gene that if it is not there, we are not human beings. Unfortunately, our culture, African culture, Kenyan culture, all the tribes that we have, 42 or 43 that we have, these are cultures that are very, very important. But they have been interfered with in the past through colonialism. And it is still being interfered with. It is still changing. It is still not the same as a long time ago. But we need to preserve them because we are preserving our identity. We will be laughed at if we do not preserve it. If I lose my Luo language, where will I belong? What will people think of me? But our children are losing it, and we are not caring. We do not give a hoot about the language that our children are speaking today. They are mixing up English and Swahili and a bit of their local language. Sometimes they speak pure American English, and they cannot utter a word, even the word thank you, even the word asante sana, they cannot speak it because they speak European language. We are, as parents, have also failed in preserving the culture of our people because we enjoy to see our children speak British or American English. Secondly, we have tried in this country to preserve culture through the museums that we have. But unfortunately, again, these museums, they're shallow. I was in a committee of sports last Parliament, and we had a chance to visit a number of museums that we had. It was shameful to see how shallow, how empty they were. There were no anything that would indicate the culture of our people. They were scanty, they were too old, they were torn apart. We need to create or come up with what we can show to our children as part of what is in the museum. The museums are not having the right things. They're too old, too broken apart. Nobody seems to put money there to ensure that even our museums have the items, the artifacts that require our understanding of the past. That is missing. The school system has tried, I must say that, because we normally have school music festivals, drama festivals. These are events that help us nurture the past, bring out the past. Our children try to wear those clothes of long ago so that they can sing these songs when they come for competition. But it's just for competition and the story is over. We do not carry it forward. We do not say, we do not care about the clothes that we used to wear in the past and keep them and reserve them somewhere in the museum. It is just for events for a period over 1 day, 2 days, and it's over. It's unfortunate that we do not celebrate our culture. We need to do that constantly. In this country, we also have Heroes Day. We celebrate our heroes, the people of the past, what they did for us, how great men and women they were, and we celebrate them. But at least there we conquer. There we have done well, because it's every year we celebrate the great men and women of this country, of the past and of the present. They've done marvelously well. In my community, recently in Nyanza, last December, that's 3 months ago, we had a celebration, a 2-day celebration, which was called Pinyuluo. Pinyuluo simply means Luo world, the Luo world. And we invited guests from all over. We were tracing the history of the Luo people, right from Sudan, and how they spread out in so many countries in this world. They're in Uganda, they're in Tanzania, they're in West Africa, they're everywhere. So many countries. And many people came to celebrate the Luo culture at that time. There were music, good food of long ago, and men and women who know the history of the Luo movement from Sudan to here. Even today, we were burying or we were praying for a great professor, Professor Bethuel Alan Ogot, who has written a lot about the Luo culture in many, many books and articles. In one of the presentations last December, before he passed away, he told us the power of women, how women were highly respected, and how even in the Luo movement from Sudan, the people who led the Luo movement, a number of them were women. He highlighted the role that women played in history in the Luo people. But somehow today we are losing it. Nobody cares about the role that women play historically in various movements, historical movements, in wars and anything else. Appreciation and making sure that we conserve the names, the activities, and the roles that they play. It is therefore very important that this bill must be supported, because it is a bill that is helping in preserving a culture that is dying. The Kenyan culture is rich. We are 42 communities. And that does not mean we are divided. It simply means all these communities with their cultures can make us very strong as a united nation. Kenya is a united nation. 42 communities form a nation. And so we need to celebrate the cultures that we have, the 42 cultures that we have. I know culture is dying, but we need to still fight very hard to protect it. We need to protect Gotramogi. That is a hill where our ancestors settled when they arrived in Kenya those many years. Nobody should go there in that land and start digging and treating it like its own. It must be protected, and nobody should interfere with it. We have the Kikuyu Kiondo. I remember very much in this very house, somebody brought the issue of Kikuyu Kiondo, that some other European countries are grabbing and calling it their own. It is owned by the Kikuyus because that is a traditional basket that they weave, that is part and parcel of their identity. But some people, foreigners, have grabbed it and made it their own. So that is where the catch is. We are losing what we have to the European countries. We need to grab back our culture that they have taken, what they are making so much money on, that belong to us. We need it here, right here. Because if we don't watch it, they will grab everything and they will take us back to their country and make money out of us. Very soon, you will call that slavery. They will soon pick us up and take us over there if they're taking some of our property that we need to protect. I'd like to conclude, because I'm rushing somewhere else, to say that I support very, very highly this very bill, because I'm supporting our identity, I'm supporting our way of life, I'm supporting the Kenyan people who are protecting and fighting for their communities, fighting for their values, fighting for their way of life as lived by a people of today's culture. Thank you, and thank you for giving me this opportunity, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Naomi Wako.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this debate that I like because of the Cultural Bill 2024 that has been moved very ably by the Chief Whip, and I have been listening. And as one of the people who love their culture and just get excited about our cultures, I have been so excited this evening, and also seeing that there are many people like me. Honorable Speaker, I support this bill fully because the bill was informed by Article 11 of the Constitution of Kenya, which recognizes culture as the foundation of the nation and as the cumulative civilization of Kenyan people and the nation. It commits the government to promote all forms of national and cultural expression. In fact, what excites me is all forms of national and cultural expression through literature, arts, traditional celebrations, science, communication, information, mass media, publication, libraries, and other cultural heritage. Honorable Speaker, we are who we are because of our cultures, our behavior, our way of dressing, our way of expressing ourselves, and even the way we interact with each other and socialize is because of our culture and that strong foundation that was based on our culture. Unfortunately, today, we keep losing, and many people say culture is dynamic. Yes, it is dynamic, but we don't have to lose our good and beautiful culture. Honorable Speaker, as I was growing up, one test that any young man or woman has to go through is anytime a visitor comes to your home, number one, you have to say your name. You have to say your father's name. You have to say your grandfather's name and continue up to the last generation. And after that, you have to tell the visitor your clan and the age set of your parents and your own. And by the time you finish that, then you would have passed the exam. And by the time you have gone through that interview, everybody knows that, yes, this child has been brought up in a good way or is being brought up in a good way. Honorable Speaker, those are the things we cannot find today. When I went to Norway in 1997 to do my master's, the first thing I interacted with was, I saw so many people, the Oromo speakers there. And from our country, I had my firstborn and the secondborn with us. And we were always proudly speaking about, Kenya and very good English in everything. But within very few months, we realized that speaking our own language was the best thing that we would have done for ourselves. And within 3 months, we were able again to bring back our children, and we started speaking our language, which brought a lot of value. And anytime we interacted with other Africans, we would also speak our language, and everybody celebrated with us. And since then, speaking our language in our home is our priority. Practicing the good cultural practices is another thing that we have always done. Honorable Speaker, the more we practice our good cultural practices, the more we will grow our country and also keep our valuable heritage, whereby other people in Western world today, you don't have what you see in our country. We have 42 different ethnic groups. We have, in my own country, we have 14 different ethnic groups. Each group having their own unique and special cultural practices. The more we do this, the better for us as a country, Honorable Speaker. I support this bill because since independence, it is important for us to know that since independence, Kenya has never enacted comprehensive legislative framework to support the integration of culture and cultural heritage in national development agenda. Honorable Speaker, it is many years. And the potential that is there in our cultures, the beautiful practices. You know, even before we were born, although Christianity was not there and maybe Islam was not there, our forefathers used to pray to God. And they used to do so many things. I remember they used to tell me that even during the drought season like now, the elders and the spiritual fathers would just go somewhere, pray, and command that it rains. And it has always rained. But today you cannot see that because we are not living in those practices. Honorable Speaker, it is too late. In fact, this bill would have been there many years ago, so that our young people can enjoy and so that we can harness the potential of our culture. Honorable Speaker, I support this bill because of the intention. The bill is also intended to facilitate the implementation of international conventions and treaties that have been ratified by Kenya. This will take us to another level. We will make our people proud of their culture, and we will also make use of those old people who are there among us now so that they can bring the beauty. They can tell us what they know. Again, Honorable Speaker, I support this because this bill, in clause 4 of the bill, it sets out the guiding principle which include the national values and principles set out in Article 10, 27, 201, and 232 of the Constitution, and giving equal recognition, dignity, respect of all cultures, including cultures of minority or marginalized people. Honorable Speaker, this is where I belong. And for many years, we have been marginalized. We have remained minority, although we still uphold our beautiful cultures. And this bill, for the first time, has specifically mentioned us as a group so that our cultures, even if we are the minority, even if we have been marginalized for many years, our culture should also be recognized. And in recognizing that, we will have the feeling that we are part of this country. Honorable Speaker, for many years, those of us who live in northern Kenya have been referring to this part of the country as Kenya A, and those of us in Marsabit and beyond as people living in Kenya B. But by including us in such things and also recognizing our beautiful cultures, recognizing our forefathers, recognizing the heroes, recognizing the beautiful things that we do even in that part of the country, because God has given us one special gift, that we have beautiful people in northern part of Kenya. And with our beautiful culture, then we can add a lot of value to the country and our practices. Honorable Speaker, again, I support this because this bill, clause 5 to 19 of the bill, establishes the management of culture in Kenya and delineates the function of both the national and county government. I support this fully. And mine is just to say that our county governments should see how they can promote the different cultures, the cultural practices that are there, those that are harmful, like FGM, early marriages, inheritance of women, we can put that aside. But those good cultural practices should be enhanced, should be promoted, so that even our young people can have somewhere they can go and see the value of our cultures. Honorable Speaker, we need to finish the debate on this and make sure that our president will sign so that it can be practiced. And as we do that, we should think of Cultural Week in Africa, Cultural Week in Kenya, our cultural outfit, so that even when we come to Parliament, for that 1 week, we can be practicing.
The Honorable Ndindi Nyoro. Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for this chance. Mr. Speaker, even on the onset, it's very important to discuss also the soft side of our country. The country we call Kenya, in the definition of it, Honorable Speaker, is just boundaries. And I'm saying so because many times we confuse between several things. One, what is the country, the republic, the nation, the government, and the state. Honorable Speaker, what we call a country is just by the boundaries that define where Kenya lies. The other functions, Honorable Speaker, that defines what the state is the state apparatus, Honorable Speaker, the institutions of governance, which predominantly are made on the institution that guarantee the rule of law and accountability, rule of law, of course, through the judiciary, accountability through democracy in a house like the legislature, and also a functional modern state, which then defines the executive. Honorable Speaker, many times you don't talk about what the nation is, the nation of Kenya. And Honorable Speaker, I've talked about the country called Kenya. I've talked about the state, which makes the apparatus of the institution of governance. Honorable Speaker, there is also something very fundamental called the nation. And the nation is the soft side of the country. And Honorable Speaker, many times, even economically speaking, many countries actually progress when they have been able to align their culture. And Honorable Speaker, many times we confuse the culture and the language. That is only one side of what we call the nation, or shared identity, or shared values. The soft side of the country, Honorable Speaker, encompasses and answers the question of who are we as a country, who are we as a citizenry. Honorable Speaker, one could be language, others could be shared values, others could be even our temperament, others could be our disposition as a people, because, Honorable Speaker, all these soft sides of what defines the people form what is called the culture. Honorable Speaker, in this modern era, it is beholden upon all of us, and that is why culture is always actually not static, Honorable Speaker. It is progressive and dynamic. It behoves all of us to look at the segments of our culture which then brings identities that are static. Identities, Honorable Speaker, that then brings about fault lines in the relationships of the people. And that is why many countries, Honorable Speaker, have had many people with different cultures, but they came together to find an overarching culture, a shared value across. That is why a country like Switzerland is actually more fragmented in terms of ethnicities than Kenya. But when you look at it, it is more cohesive. A country like Tanzania, Honorable Speaker, is more fragmented in terms of ethnicities. But when you go to Arusha or Dar es Salaam, and you ask anyone which tribe you come from, the first thing they ask you is, are you Kenyan? And Honorable Speaker, what I'm just trying to say is that it is important progressively. It may not happen very suddenly. Progressively, that for a country to actually thrive economically, they have to pull in one direction. And for a people to pull in one direction, they have to be the same people. That homogeneity of the people, Honorable Speaker, comes about by coming up with a culture that overacts and a culture that is shared across all people. People could be speaking different languages. People could be different even in their appearance, Honorable Speaker, but it is important, even for a country to thrive, that we pull in one direction. And for us to pull in one direction, we first of all have to deal with the fault lines. We have to deal, Honorable Speaker, with things that divide us and find an overarching culture and shared values that bring us together as a people. And upon that, Honorable Speaker, the beauty is that we always have a chance. As a country, we have a chance. As a continent, we have a chance, Honorable Speaker, so that we can define ourselves, Honorable Speaker, through an overarching identity, and an identity that which is not static, but which is fluid. Honorable Speaker, most of the static identities are the ones that pull people apart. For example, when you are born in a different, speaking in a different language, Honorable Speaker, many times, therefore, in that particular ethnicity you come from, you may never be able to change it in your lifetime. But, Honorable Speaker, also, another static identity that we always have to live with, Honorable Speaker, many times it comes as religion. Honorable Speaker, there are also other fundamentally static identities. But the current era, the modern age of nation building, Honorable Speaker, departs from those static identities and chaperones and comes up, Honorable Speaker, with a fluid identity where people can cross over. In the identities that are static, you can't cross over. But in a fluid identity that brings people together, it becomes a big bus where anyone can get in, Honorable Speaker, and it becomes an identity where anyone can cross over, Honorable Speaker, and feel they belong. And I believe that is what we must do as the leadership of our country, as the leadership of our continent, because I believe together as a continent, we are one people. We just have to fight that one commonality, because together, and especially as Africa, we are one people, Honorable Speaker. We must act as one people. We must pull in one direction so that our continent can actually have better days ahead. And even the same should percolate to the individual states, to the individual nations, Honorable Speaker, to the individual countries, so that we continue building a cohesive society. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Very well. Sounds like the Hegelian philosophy or something of that type. Let's hear from Honorable Wilberforce Oundo.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity to also lend a voice in support of the bill before us, the Culture Bill, which is a bill essentially to give effect to Article 11.3 of the Constitution of Kenya that calls for the protection and preservation of the culture of the people of Kenya. Honorable Speaker, culture espouses the entire life of the individual. Culture espouses is the glue that binds the individual to the community. And what is a community? Honorable Speaker, when you look at the bill, they attempt to define a community. And a community defines a culturally homogeneous and consciously distinct group of people who share any of the following attributes: common ancestry, similar cultural mode of livelihood or language, geographical space, ecological space, or community of interest. Honorable Speaker, Kenya is a case study of culture. Because, Honorable Speaker, you are aware, the so-called people who are in Kenya here are not the original occupiers of the space, the geographical space called Kenya. All of us migrated from somewhere and came to this country, and because of the colonial boundaries, we found ourselves in one space, one geographical space, delineated by us Kenya, reaffirmed in our Constitution 2010 as the space called Kenya. But truly speaking, Honorable Speaker, and I would want to challenge anybody who has a contrary opinion, and this bill seems to allude to something like a national culture. We can never have a national culture because we are completely different, but we can have a community of interest because we are bound together politically. We are bound together the instruments of the state. We are bound together by the monopoly of violence that's normally bestowed on the state to ensure that we remain together. It's therefore important, as we live in this country, we must appreciate the diverse culture of the people of Kenya. I say so, Honorable Speaker, I am a Samia, and the Samia people stride both Kenya and Uganda. We were simply separated by the colonial boundaries. So if you tell a Samia person to espouse the national culture of Kenya, what about the cultural integration that we have with our community, with our brothers and sisters, our cousins across the border? The same applies to the Somali community. If you tell them they must now discard the Somali culture and espouse the national culture, what happens to the Somalis in Somalia, Somalis in Djibouti, Somalians everywhere? The same applies to my neighbors, the Tesos. The same applies to Maasais. Therefore, it is important in the drafting of this bill, and I want to echo the sentiments of KJ, when he says this bill is a generality. And even if you look at the drafting, Honorable Speaker, it would mean actually it will have almost 100 or so regulations, subsidiary legislation, to put into effect to implement this bill. This also brings now, I can understand the difficulties the drafters faced. What is culture? What is culture? Is such a fluid statement, is an ever-changing target. The culture that was there when we started migrating here is no longer culture that's tenable today. Some cultural practices have faded away, have to change by virtue of changing society. That's why, Honorable Speaker, as I'm not so sure to what extent amendments will be made to this bill to make sure that it fits. Again, if you look at the definition of culture, defines culture means the set of distinctive spiritual, material, intellectual, and emotional features of a community or a social group, incapable of being precisely defined. So, Honorable Speaker, it is a good attempt in the right direction to preserve the culture. But the only saving grace I see in this bill is an attempt to give it to the county government to recognize and register. But again, Honorable Speaker, in a heterogeneous society, community, for example, like Busia County, to what extent can the county government record and preserve the cultures of Tesos, the cultures of Samias, the cultures of Marach, the cultures of Bahayos, the cultures of Banyalas, the cultures of the Luos who have come to stay with us, the culture of the Subas who have come to stay with us, Honorable Speaker. And then also, Honorable Speaker, it is basically, my fear is the way it's drafted. And normally the way the other side has got very intransigent views to any views expressed from this end. If we pass the way it is incapable of being implemented, Honorable Speaker. We must appreciate. I totally agree. Mwacha mila ni mtumwa. But the mila, as the player says, is specific, localized, and left there. Honorable Speaker, there are some cultures that we are not willing to cede, to expose to other people, because it's our secret. Honorable Speaker, a herbalist will not allow to surrender his skill or her skill to anybody else so they can copyright, because that's their survival. So how do you register that kind of a culture and let it go out? Honorable Speaker, a night runner, that is culture, a night runner. How do you expect a night runner to go and register his innate skill to run at night and scare boys and girls, or those who roam, or even the skill of carrying some sand or gravel and throwing on top of the roof? How do you explain that, Honorable Speaker?
How do you explain that?
Honorable Undo, I thought that runners had earlier on registered their own society. Proceed.
Thank you. I hope they register the society, but not the culture, not the skill. Honorable Speaker, I totally agree. So there are quite a number of very far-reaching issues, Honorable Speaker, and culture changes over time. So which culture are we registering? Honorable Speaker, let me draw to attention of the nation that in the Samia culture, women of a certain age were never allowed to eat chicken. Yes, they were never allowed to eat chicken or eggs or some type of fish. You see now, that's why it is so difficult to contextualize the culture. Honorable Dagal is already complaining. We had the reasons for it. Honorable Speaker, you never, in my Samia culture, Honorable Speaker, you will never meet on the same road with your mother-in-law. She either goes into the bush or you go to the bush. Now, with these open roads, with the bushes gone, how do you succeed? How do you ensure you register such a culture and preserve such a culture? We must be dynamic. And that's why for me, where I sit, the focus should be in the historical books, probably collecting the artifacts of the people. Honorable Speaker, in our culture, a girl who was now already an adolescent could never share the same toilet with the father. Sure, never. Cow. But now, Honorable Speaker, we come to Nairobi, we live in 10 by 10, there's only one toilet. The culture is gone. And that's why you find some of these two small things are starting to emerge. So, Honorable Speaker, and even issues of wife inheritance, Honorable Speaker, the women's rights came and sensationalized the issue and made it look so bad. Yet it was merely protecting the lineage and the heritage of the family, because we do not want strangers to come into the family and sow some strange seeds, so that you have kids looking this way, they look like Aloro Mondi, some look like Ndindi Nyoro. We never allow that kind of an arrangement. We need the purity of the family. So, Honorable Speaker, at the right time, we'll give the experts, the advisors, we'll attempt to make amendments. But I sincerely believe culture is dynamic, let it remain fluid and ever-changing. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
The Honorable Jamatia.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. I want to, from the onset, support this cultural bill. And I want to say it is a very timely bill. It is a bill that is going to give us a lot of unity as a country. And before I even go so far, I want to quote and read a quote from one of the British Parliament legislator those days, or someone who addressed British Parliament in 2nd February 1835. His name is Lord Macaulay. He said, "I have traveled across the length and the breadth of Africa, and I have not seen one person who is a beggar, who is a thief. Such a wealth I have seen in this country, such high moral values, people of such caliber, that I do not think we would ever conquer this country unless we break the very backbone of this nation, which is our spiritual, cultural heritage. And therefore, I propose that we replace our old and ancient education system, our culture. For if the African think that all that is foreign and English is good, the greater and greater than their own, they will lose their self-esteem, their native culture, and they will become what we want them. A truly dominant nation it is. This is the year 1835, Mr. Speaker. This is a calculated move that was done in fragmentation of African culture. We are back to discussion today. In one of the British colony, Kenya. And what is haunting us today is how we can bring back our culture. The proponents of the bill has really attempted so much, as Honorable Owundo has said, to give us how a best way possible on how we can preserve and have our culture in place. But the bill speaks so much on the hardware. If you look at African culture is based so much on the software, Mr. Speaker. It is how we passed down. We were not able to write down our cultures and histories. And that is why we found ourselves in these fragmented situations. Mr. Speaker, I want to be very particular on many things. I am a believer of cultures, specifically my culture. I am a Tugen, a Kalenjin. And in Tugen culture, if you look around and everyone speaks about their culture, African culture is so similar. If you go to the Nilotic of the Luo land, you come all the way to Kisii, come all the way to the Kalenjin nation, it is whole basically African way of life. Today, we are faintly surviving because we were fragmented so much by the colonialism. From the borders, as Honorable Ndindi just put it, the sacrosanctity they gave us about the imaginary borders, that I should not be doing this because I am from the other country. It is because listening to what this, the proponents of the colonialism realize is that Africa looks like a small vault, that every time you want to save something, you put it in your vault. It is because in Europe today, you can traverse from every corner of the continent from the morning to evening without borders. But when you come to Africa, if I want to go to my nearby neighbor, Tanzania, Uganda, South Sudan here, I need a visa. And it all eroded our culture because we were just one family. I want to speak about our dressings. I really want to look forward to a day when all of us in this house will be comfortably walking in and out with our culture or cultural dresses. I want to dress in my Tugen dress and showcase my beads, whether I am half naked or whatever. It is always what we were priding on so much. There are many other ways that Africa were proud in their cultures, and many of them is artificial African cultures, and it's what we call artificial intelligence today, Mr. Speaker, like the rainmaking. That is artificial intelligence. There was a way our young mothers and our old mothers, the grandmothers, would walk in and know a small girl of around 18 years is pregnant without necessarily going to test in the hospital. Because there was no way, but there was a way they would just know. There are also ways that you cannot marry from this other clan because of the historical and passing of specifically on diseases that ever happened in some clans, that you are told as a young girl, you are only guided to be married from this point of family or clan or whatever. Also, we used to have and pride on polygamy. Most of the families here are products of members here in the floor or this house are products of polygamy. Today, we are being told we shun our polygamy status or culture and embrace homosexuality. It's a wild thinking of how Africans would easily pick other people's culture and, easily shun away or throw away their cultures. Like spiritual, for instance, Mr. Speaker. If I was born in India today, I would be an Hindu. If I was born in America, probably I was a Christian. If I was born in Iraq or Syria or somewhere, I would be probably a Muslim. I am born in Africa. What is my religion? It is because Africans were not religious. They were spiritual people. They believe in a deity that not necessarily given a name. And that is why if you go to Marsabit, you will see we pray through the sun and the moon. In the Islamic, every time they go through the Ramadan season, their artificial intelligence at that time of African would show them that the moon would have to behave this way, so that when they fast, they have to take that time, and because they were going to stay for long without eating, and all those had its own interpretation. Mr. Speaker, African culture is actually adored. As we speak today, every colonial master, be it a British, a French, Germany, Spain, and all name it, have the artifacts of Africans in their own colonies or in their own countries. I want us, as Kenya, we will need to raid on British Museum and get our artifacts and bring back to Kenya. We are bringing this culture bill because we are going back to the roots and we are taking back our cultures with pride. We want to eat our food. Nowadays, if you go to hospitals, you find young children having diabetics because of the social food that we have exposed ourselves. We eat junk food all the time. But on those days, in my culture, because of the less food we used to have, if you are eating proteins, let's say milk, you can't drink milk and eat meat at the same time. And it was also a balanced diet. You could not eat a lot of starch without having vitamins in it. And also, we used to balance with natural food like honey. If you come to Baringo today, every household believes honey is medicinal. And when we used to take care of our father's goats and cows, we used to take honey in the morning. We could take them all the time because it was nourishing. And every time we take honey, you don't get cough easily. You don't get sick anytime or many times. It used to be almost like a whole meal. Because when you take honey, Mr. Speaker, you most likely going to take a whole day. So otherwise, Mr. Speaker, I want to say categorically that this bill should be enhanced as it goes through the process. We want to ask the President, as he signs it, it should be marinated with a proper cultural day. We need to dress properly. And when the bill is being signed, we need also to give it as a sign of patriotism. During the cultural day of Moi Day, those days, we need, or Utamaduni Day, it must give us the patriotism through our culture. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well, and strong arguments. She just quoted Lord Macaulay, some teacher of history and government. In that debate, he was arguing with a man called William Travaropa. You may need to just go beyond that. Let's listen to Honorable Beatrice Adagala.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity also to voice my concern on this bill. I think the bill has come at the right time, and it is encouraging and enriching on culture. Like in my place, there is this famous words, Mulimoyo Musangalile. That is our culture, and that is the greetings of the new year. So, Mulimoyo Musangalile. Mr. Speaker, I want to say thank you for this bill. Whoever has come up with it, our cultures are diverse. We are several people, like in my county. I'm proud of having several communities. We have the Tirikis, the Maragolis, the Banyoris, and the Teriks, who have diverse cultural backgrounds that are very enriching and which can be taken with the seriousness it deserves. People connect with each other at the time when they're doing their cultures. Culture is part of an identity. It makes somebody to identify himself with a particular group. The way I've said, like the Tirikis have a very rich culture, which if I can go by what Honorable Undo was saying, the women are not supposed to eat chicken in the Luya culture. They were not supposed to. That was just instilling discipline, and it was considered as part of the culture, although it has been eroded at the moment. People eat although there were several parts that were meant for men,
But now, with the present things, people are eating everything. Identity of communities is a very rich culture that we need to embrace. Communities were identified with the various activities, like in Vihiga, the Trikis have a very rich cultural circumcision. The Bunyores are the rainmakers, they are known for that. The Teriks have theirs, and the Maragolis have a very rich Maragoli culture too. So these ones we need to encourage. We need to encourage them so that they don't get away. Some of them have very rich education values that they teach our children. We can be wondering where some of these things have gone. The children may not be knowing. Speaker, protect me from Oundo, Professor Oundo, and the Superman. They're making
Professor
a lot of noise.
Oundo, calm down. Thank
Yes.
you. Proceed, Honorable Dagala.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for protecting me. These men are shouting like it's a marketplace. In fact, I was actually explaining my rich culture because I'm a proud Tiriki girl and a proud Maragoli woman. So these are very rich cultures that we need to tap into it. We need to protect. We need them. We need our children to learn out of a lot of things from the elders, the culture, how things used to be done. Let us not just take culture like something that is backward, that it is looked at it. Our Ipusa, like we are going to have it in August, it's a very rich culture. We feel very nice in August when we shall be doing our thing in Hamisi. So let us not look at this bill. It has come at the right time. Every culture must be preserved. Every community, they have diverse. The Maasais have theirs, others have theirs. Okay, somebody has said we have people in Uganda and Tanzania. I know we have Maragolis in Kigumba. We have, and they still maintain that. Even the Subas are here. They are my uncles. And we share a lot of things with them. So let us not look at culture and think that we can dilute culture. Culture is one of the best things that brings us as communities together. Like in December 26th, the Maragolis have a culture. You will get Maragolis who are in Uganda, Maragolis who are in Migori, Maragolis who are all over. Maragoli nation, they all come together. So therefore, this bill, it wants to cure some of these things that we have forgotten. We have made our children to look like you get a child who is supposed to say Guku, is saying something else, is saying Shosho. A child who is supposed to say this. We are bringing confusion to our children. I think this bill is going to cure some of these small things. If they have not been included in, I think we need to add more. Add more meat on it. We see where things can be changed here and there, and it becomes too low. This is a best cultural bill that has ever come. And this one should also be encouraged in counties. Counties should also have theirs. Like my county, we should have, every community should have their day. The Tirikis should have their day. The Maragolis their day. The Teriks theirs. The Banyores theirs. So that we celebrate our culture, and then maybe once in a while we can have a particular one day where all these communities can come together and have one day that we do our culture. Therefore, culture promotes well-being so much. It promotes people, social cohesion. It makes people like boys who are growing up those days knowing very well, these are our sisters, these are our mothers. Right now, culture is being eroded. You get small boys raping old women. You get old men raping small kids. Where is the society heading to? I think this bill will cure all this social. It will promote well-being and social cohesion of our societies. Economic growth. This culture is very rich. Like the Maasai are known all over for their welcoming gestures and what they do. Let us promote this so that it will economically, we get so many tourists coming to see our diverse culture. Let us not ape the Europeans, the outsiders. the West world, what they do, some of the things they do are very backward. We don't have to teach our children those kind of things. Let us teach our children our values of our communities. And when we actually, like we used to have an old man in Hamis who used to play the famous Isukuti. Well, let us put our regalias, our things together. We bring visitors. Tourists should come. When they come to see Ingonga Murui, or they come to see our 3 stones, our Mahiga, in Vihiga there, they will be seeing most of the things there, and it will be of an economic growth in our area. We shall get so many tourists visiting. We shall, hospitality industries will spring up. We shall have our children getting employment. Our youth who are jobless will get jobs. And this is just by encouraging our culture. This culture will be, will also, on innovation side, it will assist us. We will put our things together through the internet, through what, and people will be seeing outside there what is happening in Africa, and they will come and visit these countries. We'll visit our country, Kenya. They will visit even my village to see how those Tirikis make those masks, our beautiful masks during circumcision. This will bring a lot of money that side. You will get visitors flocking, so many of them, by using this innovation internet to market our tradition that is coming up in August. If it will be marketed very well, you will get a lot of tourists flocking to Hamisi to go and witness what is going on. So I think this bill has come at the right time. It will make us move. It is going to instill morals. It is going to make our people now embrace each other as a community. And this will be an economic value. It will make an economic value to our people. And again, as a country, we must have this culture, a culture day. We must have a uniform that we shall be putting on as Kenyans, so that we look like we belong to this country, Kenya. Not even on our cultural day, somebody's in a different color. This one is in a cow skin. Another one has a monkey on the head, a monkey skin on the head. I think we have to embrace this bill. This bill, it is really the best bill that has ever come, and it should be worked on very fast, Mr. Speaker, sir. It should be worked on very fast so that we finish up with it. It is signed into law so that
You have had your bite. The Honorable Karoli Omondi.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Let me begin by clarifying to the world that in spite of Honorable Undo's sentiment that Ndindi Nyoro and I are probably serial inheritors, we are serial monogamists, but I have no problem with widowed women remarrying. I just don't call it inheritance. I think we all deserve companionship. Mr. Speaker, our Constitution in Article 11 declares culture as the foundation of our nation. And actually what this bill seeks to achieve is to actualize Article 11, Sub-Article 3 of the Constitution, which calls for the monetization of culture and cultural norms of communities, where the use of our culture can generate compensation in terms of payment of royalties to various communities. That is the main purpose of this bill. Culture is our cumulative civilization expressed in very many forms. If you look at the bill, you have art representation of culture, you have artistic, historical monuments, archaeological artifacts, ethnological interests, works of art, manuscripts, archives, meaning literature, furniture, musical instruments. It is also religious, it is social, it is economic. It is a cumulative of all the civilization. In other words, the knowledge of a people at any particular point in time. Culture by its nature is not static. culture changes. And in my view, I think we can still achieve a national culture. Because if you study most of the cultural practices or cultural norms or cultural art or ethnology or historical archaeological artifacts, they are expressions of various ideas borrowed from various different people at different times. And I believe if we work hard, we can still achieve a national culture for Kenya, borrowed from the good of every community. Much of the culture we know today probably will consider it archaic or, as the English taught us, repugnant to justice and morality in a few years to come. Let me also acknowledge that what this particular bill is trying to do is to create a framework to monetize culture for communities. That is what it is trying to do. Culture by itself is very difficult to patent because, as you see in the bill, it belongs to a wide scope of people called a community, who could be 1 million, 4 million, 10 million people. And to create a patent or a legal framework in which to monetize it is very difficult for individuals. So what this bill is actually trying to do is to create a legal framework where communities can monetize their culture through what we call cultural industries. And just to reinforce my conviction that we are still on in a motion that we can create the completely a new culture, I will want to quote the words of one famous English poet I like very much, Lord Tennyson, in his poem, Ulysses, where he says, "I am part of all that I've met." In other words, every interaction you have with somebody else should enrich you, and you should borrow whatever the cultural practices that will advance your knowledge and standing in society. "I cannot rest from travels, yet all experience is an arc wherethrough. It is not too late to seek a new world." I believe as a country, we should endeavor to get what we can call a Kenyan culture, borrowing from all the diverse cultural identities that we have. Speaker, this bill seeks to create two things that we don't have hitherto. One is a national database of community culture. There is no database. In other words, whatever we are talking about here, there is nowhere you can go and find it documented and recorded and acknowledged as belonging to a particular community. It also seeks to create a register of those cultures and cultural heritage, as well as cultural practitioners and cultural groups and associations. That is the framework that we need so that anybody using that information or accessing it or applying it to cultural industries can then generate some income for those communities upon payment of some fees. It may look like it is not very well drafted, but it is the difficulty of what do you do to monetize culture. So the attempt here, and I'm speaking now as a member of the Sports, Arts and Culture Committee, is to create that legal framework of a register, a database, and a mechanism for collecting and recording our various cultural practices and norms. And then creating an opportunity for communities that have developed them to benefit from cultural industries. And we have so many cultural industries. But for communities to interface with promoters of cultural industries, we need something called prior informed consent in terms of the use of their cultural norms and practices. And that again is envisaged in this bill. So anybody wishing to tap into a cultural activity or a norm from a particular community will need to have something called prior informed consent of that community to use that culture or cultural heritage. And there are many, many industries, cultural industries, that are already benefiting without transferring any benefits to the communities. Filmmaking is one of them. You create films about Maasai culture, about Turkana culture, about other communities, circulate them in the world, make money, and never share the profits with the communities. Fashion industry is another one. Today you can go to Paris and you see the Maasai red and black, the checked ones, all over the catwalk, and nobody is paying any money for it. Academic publications, books, articles, promotion of tourism, people coming to watch Gedi ruins or going to visit certain archaeological sites. Cultural exhibitions are very common, where people organize cultural events, money is raised but not shared with the communities. Culture as a marketing tool. We have very many instances where people's culture are used to promote goods or services. Art items, paintings, artifacts, musical productions, yeah. Medicine, somebody talked about that. In Kwale, there's actually a community that has traditional mechanisms for birth control that are as effective as whatever you'll get from Pfizer. But it has not been patented and it belongs to the community. Design of clothes, furniture, as well as industrial production of foodstuffs. You find a lot of traditional cuisine has been taken over by industries, packaged and sold. And those revenues are not shared by the community. So what I would like to urge members is to actually look at the bill very positively and understand that what we are trying to do here is to create that framework. And much of the work will be by way of regulations. But it would be good to hear views to strengthen the bill at this particular stage. But the whole idea is that the cultural industries can now be given the framework within which to pay compensation and royalties to our communities for the use of their culture and cultural heritage. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
Cynthia Muge.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to add my voice to this bill. First, I want to appreciate the leader of majority and the drafters of this bill for the effort they have made in bringing to us a bill that tries to address the issues and the concerns that we've had for a very long time regarding culture. Honorable Speaker, I want to appreciate three aspects of this bill. The first aspect, Honorable Speaker, is that this bill is trying to operationalize an article in the Constitution that provides for the cultural heritage of this country, Honorable Speaker, and it is there for protecting it. The second aspect, Honorable Speaker, that I want to appreciate is that it has apportioned responsibility to the county governments, Honorable Speaker, that the county governments then are encouraged to be able to, one, own the cultures in their counties, and secondly, Honorable Speaker, they're supposed to then make an effort to make sure that they display those cultures. Honorable Speaker, we must appreciate that this country has diverse cultures. And there's a saying, Honorable Speaker, that says the strength lies in the differences. It does not lie in the similarities. And this is where our strength as a country, Honorable Speaker, and as a culture lies, that we have diversity in culture. We have a lot of different cultures in this country, and that is where we draw our strength from. Again, Honorable Speaker, I want to appreciate this committee also for trying to be able to sort out what I'd like to call the hardware. The hardware in this case, Honorable Speaker, is the items that are going to regulate, one, the item that most of the members have spoken to. How then are these counties, how then are the people who are custodians of this culture able to then leverage on that culture to make an income? It is a very progressive way of trying to see to it that that happens in this country. And I appreciate this bill for trying to put those items across. Honorable Speaker, I want to say that the culture is better dealt with in the counties if we are then able to, if we really want to show the diverse culture in this country. So that a county like mine, which has different cultures, as much as I come from Nandi County, Honorable Speaker, you would imagine that it is only the culture of the Nandis that is there. But Honorable Speaker, we have other people who live in Nandi. We have Luyas who live in Nandi. And we also celebrate their culture because they have different cultures regarding different matters. Honorable Speaker, we have how they undertake their cultural practices, like the ceremonies, be it marriage, be it circumcision. There's a way they do it. And in my county, Honorable Speaker, when it is time for the young men to be taken for that ceremony, we all come out to be able to spectate and see how the Luya community that has a different culture in my county go about their own. The Nandi people also, Honorable Speaker, have a very good way that they do their own. And they even have sayings regarding it, Honorable Speaker, that they, and I quote, Honorable Speaker, Tumdanyo Manaiji, Honorable Speaker, so that there is a way that they do it in that same place. And Honorable Speaker, it is fair and it is good that the culture is preserved as it is for the future generations, so that when my young sons and daughters come of age, they can be able to appreciate how their people used to do things, how their people used to go about marriages, because many things have changed. In our culture, for instance, there used to be a lot of ceremonies regarding marriage. There used to be a lot of processes regarding it. But nowadays, Honorable Speaker, you just find it being done casually. And I think that is something that we must hold on to, because a people who do not have a culture do not have anything in their hearts and in their souls, Honorable Speaker. So I appreciate, Honorable Speaker, that this particular bill is trying to address the hardware of it. However, Honorable Speaker, I must say that culture is a very huge component, a component that cannot be addressed, especially through a bill. And I like to say, Honorable Speaker, that to a higher and a larger extent, we cannot conclusively, we cannot adequately be able to legislate culture. We cannot adequately do it. And therefore, Honorable Speaker, we should just endeavor to make sure that it is in the hearts and in the souls of the people, so that these people can be able to portray the culture, because culture really is a way of life. It is how we do things, it is how we relate, it is how we live, it is a lot of things that we cannot be able to put on paper and be able to do justice to it. What we want to do, Honorable Speaker, and this is my suggestion, is number one, the heading of the bill, I do not feel like the heading relates properly or does justice to the content that is in the bill. And when the Committee of the Whole House, Honorable Speaker, sits, I will be keen to be able to introduce an amendment so that, Honorable Speaker, we can customize the title of the bill so that it can speak to the matters that are actually in this bill, as opposed to what it has right now. Because, Honorable Speaker, justice to the word culture that is in this country, Kenya alone, has not received any kind of justice in the contents in this bill. And therefore, Honorable Speaker, that is why the bill comes to the House, so that all of us can be able to put our heads together, we can be able to put our thoughts together, we can be able to enrich the bill further and be able to make it more inclusive, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, we must also look at how we address issues, because there are cultural practices, Honorable Speaker, that are outdated, and they are just not outdated, Honorable Speaker, they are just bad. They are bad cultural practices. For instance, Honorable Speaker, my county and my people used to do female genital mutilation. It was a cultural practice for my community. And Honorable Speaker, we all agree that FGM is not a thing to carry from the cultural practices we used to have before. And therefore, Honorable Speaker, we must be in a position to look at the cultural practices that were good that we left behind, and that were bad that deserve to be left behind as a progressive nation and as a progressive people. Honorable Speaker, the social behaviors is part of culture. And this is what we need to pay attention, Honorable Speaker, because even if we do the hardware of culture and we do not have the software of culture, then we have nothing going on at all, Honorable Speaker. So that then we are able to speak to how then do we make sure that the generations that are coming are able to carry the culture that we used to have as a people, and even enrich it better, Honorable Speaker, because as much as we are protecting culture, as much as we are supporting the culture and saying we must be able to always remember it, we must also be progressive so that we are not left behind. I appreciate this bill, Honorable Speaker, because it has really attempted to be able to sort out the hardware of it, like I have said, and protect some of the items. You hear us in Nandi County, Honorable Speaker, we are still asking for the head of Koitalel Samoe to be brought back here. Why? Because Koitalel Samoe is a person that means a lot to the people of Nandi. And we therefore, Honorable Speaker, appreciate this bill because it actually criminalizes anyone who holds any of those artifacts, anyone who holds any of those items that we feel is part of our culture, are criminals. So we want to be able to support this bill so that can be able to sort that part of it, and then we can be able to have items like the head of our hero,
Koitalel somewhere back to our place so that, Honorable Speaker, we can then be able to tell our story and give evidence of our story and where we came from. So, Honorable Speaker, I support this bill. Of course, we are going to enrich it as it is the role of this House to be able to make it better and to be able to make it speak to the issues that we really want it to speak to. But all that said, Honorable Speaker, culture is something that resides in the heart and the souls of the people. And we should endeavor to cultivate it in the souls and in the hearts of every Kenyan. Then they can be able to showcase it and we can be able to have a collective culture as a people differently, so that everyone has their own, and when we come together as the country Kenya, we are proud of all the cultures that are presented or represented within the country. I support this bill, Honorable Speaker. When the time comes, we'll be able to make amendments to it so that can be able to cover some of the issues that we feel have been left out. I support, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Jackson.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I also want to support this bill. Mr. Speaker, this is a very important bill, and also it is a very complicated bill. Because, Mr. Speaker, if you look at the culture in our country, we have very many diverse cultures. And Mr. Speaker, culture is a way of life. And many of Africans, to say so, each and every community has its own culture. And I think, Mr. Speaker, what we should focus in this bill is the protection of those cultures and the artifacts from those culture in those communities. Because, Mr. Speaker, if you look at maybe the Maasai culture is totally different from any other community culture. And I think, Mr. Speaker, what is maybe good in another group of people can totally be different from another. And I think culture has been there since. We are not trying to say let's create culture. And Mr. Speaker, yes, culture is good. And as Kenyans and Africans, to say so, very many people have shifted from what we are calling now culture. Even our children, they don't know those things. If you look at your children, they may not even know how to greet maybe somebody in their language. And I think, Mr. Speaker, this is a good bill, but it is very important we focus on the protection of the material things belonging to our cultural groups. I think that is the very important thing we want to look at. And I think, Mr. Speaker, I visited a country sometimes back last year, and what I saw in that country, in a hotel, is a photograph of Masai Mran put there so that maybe it can attract people. People will see that is a good thing. And those are the things, Mr. Speaker, we just have to make this bill to protect such things. And you see, Mr. Speaker, even to implement, by the way, if you look at maybe our mode of dressing, I know sometimes back when Senator Ladama was trying to address like a Maasai, but the parliament has a problem. The speaker fight hard to to chase even Dama, but at least he insisted that he was addressing in the right way. And Mr. Speaker, it is good to look at these things, but even the implementers of this, whatever we are suggesting, may not even believe in those cultures. And I think it is very important, Mr. Speaker, our cultures are rich, and they have so many good values. I totally agree with the members that there are very bad practices in our cultures. And I think those bad practices has been given maybe the law to manage that. So what is remaining, because we can not have a culture, so to say, Kenyan culture. I know maybe you'll ask anybody how Kenyans behave. It is different from what we are saying culture. The Kenyan culture is different from maybe our community's culture, because we have copied the white man culture, and that is it. So I think, Mr. Speaker, this is a good bill, but it is not taking all this, what we are saying about culture. Let us focus how to protect our artifacts. Let us focus how maybe to go about all those very important things in a certain culture. And I think, Mr. Speaker, we really need to polish what maybe is not okay, because culture is an identity to somebody. If you see maybe, Mr. Speaker, sometimes when I walk in town, anybody meeting me greets me super, without even knowing who is this, but they know this is a Maasai. And I think that's very important, Mr. Speaker. But some people, when you walk, maybe nobody will know you are a Maasai or you are whatever. But me, I have an identity that anybody, any Kenyan who knows the Maasai will greet me super. And I am very proud of Mr. Speaker. I am very proud because I cannot get lost, by the way. If somebody gets me lost somewhere, he will trace me back to Maasai land. And that is very, very good. So I think, Mr. Speaker, what we can be able to manage, let us manage it.
The point of order, Honorable Undo.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I just want my colleague to assist us. Maasais are in Kenya and in Tanzania. So where will they take you? To Tanzania or to Kenya? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the Honorable Member is right, but the widely known Maasai are Maasais in Kenya. And Kenya, you cannot talk about Kenya without talking about Maasai. So, Mr. Speaker, it is, even in Kenya, at least Maasais are known. And whatever they take me, even if they take me to Tanzania, I'll shoot to the Maasai in Tanzania. So, Mr. Speaker, that is very important. And we just have to pass this bill so that we can protect our artifacts, that they cannot be taken away from us, and even to preserve them. I think that is very important, Mr. Speaker, and I just want to stop at that point. I support the bill.
Okay, very lastly, because of interest, is the Honorable Beatrice Kimei. Yes, that's what's appearing on my screen. Not, you are not anywhere on my screen. Proceed, Honorable.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to add my voice to this Culture Bill 2024. I want to appreciate the drafters of the bill and the majority leader for bringing it forth. Honorable Speaker, this is a very, very important bill with the objective and the purpose of giving an effect to Article 11(3)(a) of the Constitution, which provide for the protection and promotion of culture and the cultural heritage of communities and for connected purposes. Honorable Speaker, it is very important that our Constitution is given effect. And this is one of the areas where this part, Constitution, is actually given the real effect that it deserves. Honorable Speaker, Kenya is rich in culture. Kenya is diverse in culture. Culture is dynamic. And culture in this country, every community has their own cultural practices, cultural beliefs, cultural norms. However, with all this diversity in culture, every community will have a sense of belonging because of the culture. And even with that, different cultures, I want to appreciate that us as Kenyans, we admire and appreciate the different communities with their culture. That is why when we talk of the national days, some of these communities are given opportunity to perform, be it in dancing, be it in